Hello and welcome to the Weekly Scroll podcast brought to you by the Adventure Archive. My name is Ryan.
And I am the stranger. Fear me, young godblood.
And with us tonight, we have Sophia Tinney. How's it going, Sophia?
Hi, I'm doing awesome. I'm so happy to be here.
We're so stoked to have you, really.
Like, can't even describe how stoked we are for you to be here. You know, to kick it off real quick, what would people possibly know you for?
Who are you?
About 2 years ago, I think it was Design Quest 2, I worked on Kingdoms, the design of generational proportions. I put that out and kind of did some content for it here and there, then kind of faded, and now I'm back with something new.
Oh yeah. So what is your new project?
Fever Dream Nexus.
Nice.
It's like psychedelic samurai dream world role playing. It's super weird, super out there.
Very cool. We're pretty stoked for that project as well. You can see my background is is art asset is the Nexus from that project.
So before we get into Fever Dream Nexus, and we are going to talk about that a bunch, but as we've been talking for a while before stream, because for anyone that's watched the show for a while, we are just huge fucking fans of Kingdoms. To me, it's my favorite game.
Fans. Yeah.
We did our year-end review. It definitely it was on like the list, like half of the list for like the top 5 lists, and then definitely was the top of my best games that we've reviewed for the entire year. It's so good and dark and fucked up and like fantastic. So let's start with Kingdoms before we get to Fever Dream Nexus. Why did you make this game? Like, what was the impetus for you, first of all, to pick up game design in general, and then what made you go, all right, I'm gonna make the greatest game ever?
Thank you. So I started like designing games a long time ago. It started off just like hacking stuff. Like I first got into tabletop games with like GURPS, which, oh my god,
that's quite the entry.
I learned how to do math. And then I moved on to like OSR D&D stuff, and it's just like back when I first got into that in the early 2010s, it was so like much hacking of that stuff. There's so many blogs, so much cool content out there just spread around, and I just loved making my own little games. And at some point I had like the ambition to be like, well, I want to make a game from the start of man to like steampunk modern day, because I really love like primeval, like ancient history, like a lot. So I just started working on that for my players. Naturally, it started falling to pieces, started to be like, oh, here's rules for that. Here's rules for that. Here's a tech tree. And then before I knew it, I had like a book on my hand, and I just was like, what if other people like it?
Very cool. I think it's a really great, obviously it's built around the bones of Into the Odd, but I think one of the big things that we loved about it was this kind of focus on, like, there's this micro play where you're genuinely like adventuring, like you do, like one does. And then there's like this macro kind of like zoomed out overarching view of like your own personal, like kingdoms and like families and like the growth of your bloodline. So it kind of sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, did a lot of these rules just come naturally through playtesting with your group?
Yeah, so I'd say the micro rules did pretty easily, like light dice, for example.
Yeah.
That kind of came naturally as like, oh, well, there needs to be some kind of magic, something like that. But the macro rules were a lot more of a design hurdle, because it's almost like I treated it almost like a board game, and like how you do war and how you do setting up like cities and stuff. That was a lot more of like okay, I need to carefully design a board game here. So that part definitely came from like very careful playtesting, trial and error.
Very cool. Yeah, they seem like really cool rules. Do you play like a lot of like board games outside of, or Well,
Yeah,
tabletop?
with my family, we grew up playing like really interesting board games, not just like fucking Sorry or whatever families play.
Hey, listen.
We played like a lot of weird board games.
Cool.
It just part of, like the culture in my family. Like my dad got me into D&D because he played it like back in the 70s. So it just kind of
Sick.
came naturally to be into all this
Dad.
nerd stuff.
Yeah, shout out Dad.
He's like the
Yeah.
original OSR.
It's not even like, yeah, it's not even like old school. It was just like the school back then, I guess.
Yeah, it was just regular
Yeah,
stuff.
school.
Just regular school. Just after school stuff. So, you know, what Hunter just said is definitely something we've talked about that a lot of games don't have, that really just kind of, when we were reading Kingdoms the first time, just kind of like blew us both away, is just the levels of play is crazy. The fact that, you know, not only can you, as you know, as you said, you can play as a character, but it's your entire generational bloodline. And you even have like tables that you said that go from like nothingness coming out of the dark to even to modern times. How have you ever run a campaign that actually spanned the entire like generational lineage of the game?
Ironically, I've never run Kingdoms the entire way through. Like I've run like up to like about halfway, but I've played in Kingdoms all the way through. Just a consequence of like playtesting and stuff. Eventually I was like, can someone else run this if I hand them these papers? And they
Nice.
can. So
yeah.
Oh, cool. That is actually, yeah, that makes sense. You would need that.
Well, I mean, especially in the micro play, you know, Into the Odd is such a it's a great system, but it's relatively
so much GURPS love in the chat.
Listen, one day maybe we'll talk about GURPS. But it's a pretty straightforward system. What made you want to pick Into the Odd as the primary system?
I think it kind of came naturally because a big thing of Kingdoms is that you kind of need like, what's the best way to say it? You know, in Warhammer, how there's very light rules per figurine, like per minifig. That kind of applied to Kingdoms, where I wanted very light rules per person in the scene, so that you can get the scene like really fast. You can breed really easily. You can have like you can represent a character with just super easy 3 stats. So originally, Kingdoms actually had a very Warhammer war game system of like roll under d6, but then after playing Into the Odd for a while, I like took that home to my game and just said, what if it's like a bit wider of a range? Instead of D6, it's like a D20. So it just kind of came naturally as a little bit of a deeper version of a war game. It's really simple to like have every character have 3 stats. It's really simple, roll under. You don't have to have the DM tell you like, oh, you need an 8. It's just it's very easy for like a war game battle with like beasts. So it just kind of like molded in like perfectly.
Cool.
I mean, he is our Into the Odd boy here. You know, the D20 roll under, I think, is pretty much your favorite system, right?
Oh, it's a superior system, like for sure, 100%. Like I am, like, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also like with growing up with GURPS, I love roll under, so I was here for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually never played GURPS. I've read enough of it to go, nope, not for me. But I've never got to play it, so I'll have to actually give it a shot one time. I feel like maybe if I'd got into it when I was younger, maybe I wouldn't have got C's in math. But the other thing with Into the Odd too is like it just always hits, right? Like, so when you have a game as deadly as yours, was that another consideration in it as well? Because I feel like characters die all the time, like they have to.
Oh yeah. I think that's definitely like a big pro of the system is having the very easy to kill like characters. And also, and this was kind of something I extended off of Into the Odd, because I saw it as like an opportunity that they never really used. They used it with Will, and then in the future, I forget, Electric Bastionland has like charisma or it swaps out something for something, I think, right? But the point is, it doesn't?
Go. Wait, no, as I said, I was.
Oh, okay. But the point is that like having those stats also be pools is super duper important to Kingdoms because you use every stat like in some way. So naturally having those pools both simultaneously be your success rate and your health, like just constantly depleting is like super, super cool. So yeah, I definitely the auto hit thing really helped. And it also helped with weapon design because you could focus on a lot cooler weapons when you're not worrying about, oh, am I gonna be able to hit this guy? Like, what's my to hit AC? Bullshit.
So the speaking of the deadliness, the combat, like you have very your bosses are like very Dark Souls inspired, right? They follow like a formula of attack, and like within like tabletop games, that's actually very unique, right? You really don't like. I can't think of anything where it's like, yeah, they follow a pattern. They just follow. They round this pattern. If they get hurt, they might skip steps, but it's still the same pattern. So you kind of learn how to fight. Was that like an OG design concept, or like when you when did you fall in love with that concept and add it in?
Honestly, it wasn't. I forget the name of it now, but there was a board game back in the like 2010s. It was really popular, or not really popular, but it was like a really niche board game. Kingdom Death something.
Oh yeah. It's like $1 million.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And they teased an RP model forever. And part of me was like, screw it. So I took some of like that design and those monsters and put it into Kingdoms. And obviously they transformed completely different from the source material. But in that game, they have a similar system where you flip cards and it tells you what the monster is going to do next. So no, I totally stole that.
Yeah. I think it makes combat really like interesting and different from other tabletop games.
It did.
Kind of fun because you get better at it, right? You're like, okay, I know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, it's the repeat like hunting cycle that is really interesting that I found through playtesting is when people would keep fighting the same monster, you get them learning the monster. Like they get more intelligent rather than better. And that's like something that only happens in Dark Souls. You don't see that in like OSR or board games very often.
Yeah.
You know, when people were talking about the Dark Souls board game and all its many typos and problems, a lot of people in the indie scene were like, we should make a Dark Souls board game. I'm like, just play Kingdoms. Like if you want to play Dark Souls, like just like either take this mechanic or just play Kingdoms. Like even with all the ones that I've seen that are like Dark Souls inspired or Dark Souls related, I haven't seen a system, especially combat based, that to me channels that like loop kind of exactly like you said, learn from your deaths or learn from your mistakes and keep going.
Yeah.
Done better than in Kingdoms. Like it's just, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, really I mean, Dark Souls definitely informed a lot of its like play. Like the accessory system is kind of just rings from Dark Souls at the end of the day. So yeah, it's totally Dark Souls emulator.
Nice. So we think the game is like obviously super okay, and that from us so far. But so I'm like, I really am interested. And Ryan, if you have any other questions about Kingdoms or something, go for it.
I'm sure
I'm really interested in getting to Fever Dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so Fever Dream Nexus is a like samurai, surrealist, colorful adventure where you have a track that is like, I mean, like, is it actually literally like your song? Like,
yeah.
Wow, I'm into it.
Like when I did playtesting with my group, I would literally play the song like in the scene where they were using their tracks, and like some of them were like, Sophia, what kind of music do you listen to? But yeah, when people recognize songs, it's like the best thing in the world. It's just amazing.
So in the game, you play as like, run us through the basic of the like.
So you play as a sleepwalker, which is a troubled soul who carries with them like an ego and scar that's too great to really like meld into the general populace. And as you roam between cities, which is a very like not okay thing to do, because at any point the sun can set, and then at that point like the nightmares come out. So most people just kind of stay in one place their entire life. But you traveling from city to city, nothing tying you down, just like a deep inner turmoil, are able to use all these interesting tools like tracks and like affecting the dream itself because of your like great ego and scars. So you wander around solving crimes, getting into trouble, getting arrested, like just all kinds of stuff. You're just kind of like a tragic adventurer.
Very cool. Yeah, the color scheme is like completely flipped from your very like red and black and white, and then on one page yellow from Kingdoms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely like just color vomit on the screen.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see where it goes. What was kind of like, what kind of got the ball rolling? I see that you have like, we kind of talked about earlier some of the influences, right? Like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I think, is one. We talked about Kenshi because I have a Kenshi problem. And I think is Disco Elysium on there as well?
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
What was like the birth of this game?
So it floated around in my mind for a few years as like a kind of Kenshi ripoff, but then Disco Elysium came out and then added this like new layer of like emotional turmoil and kind of like that stylistic, like if you've ever played Disco Elysium, like you talk to like your own skills.
Yeah.
That kind of like trippy, like delusional, like mess. But the world itself genuinely like comes from like the like things I have seen from hallucinogenics, like visions I have seen.
I wouldn't know anything about that at all, for sure.
I've seen like the Nexus itself, and it really is just me trying to put what I've seen like on a paper.
Cool. Hell yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna not talk about that at all, just in case I have coworkers. But
hey, listen, if my coworkers are listening, I hope you know that I've done acid and shrooms a bunch. So
good times. So the nightmares. I mean, here's the thing. Like I've never not been one note. I like the dark stuff. That's one of the things about Kingdoms, especially the black, white, and red, like the primeval darkness, all of that stuff coming through. So to me, like obviously the rainbow colors, like all of that stuff is fantastic. But talk to me about the nightmares and the shadow and the darkness in Fever Dream Nexus.
So the shadow is it's definitely not anything like you'd see like in Kingdoms. The shadow is more like a literal trauma or like tragic events or something your character carries with them that they like just can't get over. It kind of represents like a Jungian like flip side of yourself. So like this piece that your character is trying to suppress or resist. Each character has like their own shadow that they carry with them, and they can overexert themselves to achieve things, but that has the problem of bringing out the shadow, in which case your character ends up having to do some action, which is kind of like if you've ever played Rimworld or Dwarf Fortress, you have like a mental break thing.
Dude, we play a lot of the same video games, by the way. Like,
that's too, you should add me on Steam.
I'm getting from this. I'm like, oh, dude, we play a ton of the same. Yeah, totally. But yeah, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, but it's like a mental break thing for your character where you have to do some action depending on your shadow, and it's not just complete like it's not taking away control of your character, but more like giving them a new goal in order to get out of it. But the nightmares themselves are less like they aren't like the Kingdom's dark, like literal darkness. They are more like a you ever had a like fever and you've been like kind of asleep and your mind just conjures up like the weirdest things. It's kind of like that. It's just pure unadulterated like chaos of the dream. Cool. Just in crazy darkness, shapes, creatures, monsters, just horrible things that your brain can't comprehend.
Hell yeah. And trippy fractal rainbows.
Hell yeah.
Very cool. Awesome. So do you have like, so you have like a track list on here, right? Like you have like a, and like, so are these just songs that you've picked and like handpicked for this specifically and to like elicit like a certain like feeling?
Yeah. So I would say it really it's a D6 666 table. So there's like 366 of the, I forget the exact math, but there's a lot. And they range from like, your character can have like a couple, but usually they just have one. Depends on how like it's like how intellectual they are. And it varies a lot. Some of them are just like popular songs that I'm like, this would be an excellent track just based off the name. And then some of them are super out there, weird, like indie shit that I listen to that no one's going to recognize, but I still love it. There's a lot of psychedelia on there, like Tame Impala. A lot of hyperpop because I love hyperpop. A lot of like 2000s pop and emo from when I was younger. Lots of that kind of genres.
Nice. I like that it's so all over. I like that there's so many, and it's like
there is
massive variety of choices.
And then the NPCs actually have their own. I have like custom reserved like some crazy songs just for the NPCs to use it for their own sake.
Nice.
So no one has the same one.
So I think so there are several stretch goals. Where are we right now? Actually, let me pull the project I should be looking at.
I think we're on the Heaven and Illyria. It's like the second one, I believe.
What were you about to say, Ryan?
No, I was gonna say, like, one of the stretch goals that we're talking about is also one of the things in here is cultures. Like that you can, there's a D66 tables of these different cultures, and one of the stretch goals is actually creating a culture with you, I believe.
Oh, you mean like one of the tiers?
Oh yeah. I think the what is this? I'm gonna say it completely wrong. DAIMYO.
Diamo? I'm not super sure. Yeah. I'm me. I can't pronounce words.
Dude, I always feel like I can until I get on stream and try to say it. I'm like, wow, I sound like a fucking idiot. But yeah, so you have these D66 cultures that your Sleepwalker uses, and you have a tier where you can actually, it says personalized culture or unique 2-page spread of your creation. So talk about
are you talking about pledging tiers, or because I'm talking about stretch goals?
Oh, I think I jumped right ahead. So yeah,
you did.
Go back to stretch goals.
So stretch goals. Let's talk about stretch goals. Like coming up, you've already bashed through 2 of them. What's like? Talk about what's on the horizon. We want to hear more.
Yeah. So let me pull it up one more time so I could see it.
Because there's a lot. You have several stretch goals, and you've already gone through rival sleepwalkers.
Someone in chat said 100 gex, and yes, 100 gex is in this. But
that's so hilarious that.
Yeah, so in stretch goals, we have the whole rival sleepwalkers thing, which I'm super excited for, because in general, mostly in the book, the sleepwalkers don't really interact with like other sleepwalkers.
Okay.
Like, the dream is so customized around them and molded around them, they don't really run into them. But with this stretch goal, it's I'm not gonna say it's directly like it, but do you remember the Judas system in Kingdoms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of adds like a antagonist that just kind of fucks everything up for you. Like this rival group that kind of comes in, just messes around. The Heaven and Iriel tables I'm really excited for because it lets you kind of wander, meander, or accidentally transport yourself into these higher and lower plates that are just like horrible. Different versions of horrible. The blades are going to be really cool because it adds like, there's not a lot of focus on like different weapon types, unlike Kingdoms in Fever Dream Nexus. It takes the more kind of like classical OSR approach of, this weapon's 2-handed, so it does more damage. This weapon's 1-handed.
Right.
And having the whole mythological blades thing adds like a new layer where you can suddenly have a sword that does some crazy shit when you swing it. And that's super exciting. The Ready-Made Adventures one, I'm just going through them because you uh, mentioned them, but the Ready-Made Adventures one is super hype because I think a lot of times in like tabletop games, it's interesting to give the DM this big plate of food of content, but they never really know what to do with it. So giving like direction is kind of always good. Something just to drop like players in for a good night. The tables one was one that I was really excited for. We hit that in Kingdoms, and like if you recall, Kingdoms has tables in like the front of the book and the back of the book. Every page, like there's some sort of table somewhere that I just shoved in there. And I love tables. That's why I'm a DM. Postcards of the Nexus is just like a little neat thing. I really like having little things when people buy books, like when people buy Kingdoms. From me, I don't think Exalted Funeral doesn't do it, but when they buy it for me, I always put stickers, I always put pamphlets, I always put flyers. I give out character sheets a lot.
Yeah, you gave me some cool stuff. Like I had like a cool like character drawn up that was me. And yeah, I had a scroll as well. And yeah, it was such a cool thing to receive.
Yeah, I love putting little things in people's packages, so I'm really excited for that. And then the last one is super cool too. It kind of adds faces, stats, like a bunch of details to the leaders, because right now it's more focused on dynasties and like families and houses. But with that stretch goal, I would really be able to detail like the people on top. And potentially you could go and kill them if you want for some reason.
Oh yeah. I think stuff like that's
have
cool
to go
too.
Kill gods, yeah.
Yeah, just because you want to kill. I think the tables and like the leadership stuff, I think it's cool too because it gives people more context as to like the setting itself. And so it's easier to like kind of slide into the setting.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so what I was trying to jump ahead to, I think between his coffee and my Red Bull, we're just kind of bouncing all over the place. So thank you, Executive Dysfunction. But the cultures you have in the game, besides the D666 track list, you also have D66 cultures in the game. So how do the cultures individually like affect the play and the characters and stuff like that?
Yeah, so there's a great example on the main page of the KEG. What the cultures kind of affect is like they are a mix of your characters like race and upbringing and religion, your like traditional values. A lot of these cultures have little blurbs, and you can ignore a lot of like the traditions. Your character doesn't have to be every KEG, but it also gives you some abilities. And I think that's my favorite part of character creation because all of the cultures are so weird. They're so out there. There's like the KEG, just from first glance, like they're like, oh, they're justice people. They have swords and they bring justice. But then it's like, oh, also they eat people and they're vampires. Okay. So a lot of the cultures have that double-edged sword. Like there's ones that are literally people made of like ceramic. Like there's ones that are people, I think, what's some interesting ones? The Gundogans on the Kickstarter page at the bottom, there's like a really colorful lady. Their whole thing is that they love nature so much, but they find the fact that animals tread and consume nature horrible. So their whole thing is that they regain health from like hurting and other wild animals. Their whole thing is like they're tree huggers to the point of murdering wildlife. So there's a huge variance, and it's not just Japanese. Despite the title card saying like samurai, there's a lot of interesting cultures that I think are underrepresented in RPGs. Like Turkey is in here. There's lots of really interesting like Middle Eastern cultures I try to take pieces from and respect. There's lots of really interesting, like really under the radar, like Asian cultures that I think are underrepresented in tabletop games because there's just so many like European, like sword and shield. there's a lot of interesting like traditions out there that are really interesting to combine with this setting.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, you can, at least as far as I see with like the Nexus and stuff, and since so much of it is dream based and whatnot, you can pretty much do literally anything, to the point where, like I said, one of your tiers is actually having people create a culture with you. So there's really like an endless just array of things you can pull from, right?
There is, yeah. And I think it's the best part is that there's so many cultures and all of them are spread around. Every NPC has like a culture. So you always are like, oh, this is a Gundogan NPC, and you can kind of figure out how they act based off that. There's just such a huge variance of people out there and interactions between the cultures and interactions with the locales. It's just really, really wild when you get into play and see them like run around.
So we talked about tables already. There are a ton of tables in Kingdoms. We were just talking about these cultures where you literally have like these, you know, dog killing nature tree huggers and vampire justice people. Where does it all come from? Like to me, when I'm writing stuff, I find that the tables are actually some of the hardest things to just put together. Do you have just like endless other roll tables you're putting stuff together, or is this just like you're sitting down and being like, I'm gonna do these things? Like,
yeah, a lot of it genuinely is like really simple ideas, and I don't like roll any of these. I just pops into my head. Like for example, like the justice vampires is really just two concepts you kind of just slap together and create a weird thing. Same with like we love trees, but also we hate animals. It's like we're ceramic people, but also like we love nature, whatever. Like you combine these two really simple concepts and you get something really weird. And I don't think like tabletop games do that enough, because a lot of like backgrounds and worlds are like very one note, like, oh, they're justice, they're vampires, but like, why not both?
Yeah, I'm never gonna get over the fact that there's a culture that's like loves nature so much that they kill animals because they're like, well, you inherently harm nature.
Exactly, it's wild.
Oh,
I mean, you know, and like you said with one note stuff, Kingdoms it's a dark fucking game, you know, but I think that one of the things that, you know, we've talked about that we both love about it so much is the variety and depth to so much of not just the gameplay, but the world and the generational content in play. What do you think? Do you feel like it's your introduction to role-playing games like younger because, like you said, your dad, or board games, or what is it that made you want to bring so much variety to your game worlds and to your play style and design style?
Oh, I don't know. That's hard. I think it just like I'm not really sure what invites like the weird to my settings. I think it's just interesting to have it there, and I really like systems that have that. Like I think there's plenty of other systems that have interesting things. Like Ultraviolet Grasslands is a great example of like the type of vibe I'm going for, you know. Um, yeah, I couldn't really answer where I get the weird from. I just kind of discover it.
You
just channel the weird right into the game design.
Yeah, like even my GURPS games were pretty weird. They had their own unique style of weird with math.
With again, I was not good at math. I was a straight A student in high school, except for math. So I feel like if I would have met GURPS, I would have bounced off of it super hard. So maybe now that I'm a little bit older,
I tell people like, don't look at it GURPS if you aren't already in GURPS.
Yeah, well, that's all every time I hear, I've never heard someone say GURPS and both people kept a straight face. Like I've never seen that interaction happen.
It's a beautiful joke.
Yeah. Speaking of like kind of math and mechanics and stuff like that, so in Kingdoms, we said it was Into the Odd based, and with Fever Dream Nexus, like what, if you don't mind talking about, is kind of like what can people expect for the core mechanic to kind of be around?
So the core mechanic, just like how that's Into the Odd based, Fever Dream Nexus is Maze Rats like inspired. It has a very similar like very small modifiers, 2d6 like bell curve, because I love bell curves. It's one thing I wish I could have at Kingdoms, but it just didn't fit. And very simple characters with very interesting abilities. So yeah, I really like the Maze Rats very simplistic systems, but additionally there was pieces of like which I don't like it at all on its own, but Powered by the Apocalypse, or is it Played by the Apocalypse? I forget what the exact name is.
Powered by the Apocalypse, yeah.
Yeah. I do not like that system on its own, but I really like partial successes. I really like some of the story beats it has. So like 2d6, partial success, small modifiers, detailed character abilities. That's like the main core.
Can I ask what you don't like about PBTA?
So I mostly try to keep my stuff within the OSR sphere, which like PBTA, I guess there's like a generally understood like scale and like RPG communities where it's like you got simulationists and then you have story. That's like what people say generally.
Yeah.
And OSR is like somewhere like here. It's not like GURPS, but it's like somewhere here. And over here you have like the super PBTA, super light stuff where like it emulates like fiction and fictional changes as opposed to like attributes and character.
Right.
Actions, and I don't like that at all. I really like characters being able to say, I have a lantern, I'm going to throw it at him. Yeah. Like, I don't have to put a fucking like front or play move or whatever to throw a lantern at someone. I just want to do it.
So
that's exactly why Ryan doesn't like it.
That's literally what. So it's funny because your two games that you've created or put out are literally our two favorite systems. Like Into the Odd, D20 Rolled Under is unquestionably Hunter's favorite system, and 2d6 partial success without playbooks and moves is unquestionably my favorite system. So it's just kind of neat that you went from one game to the next. And we did an episode not too long ago with about talking about PBTA a lot with Aaron King, and when we did Patchwork World, he had the same problems where loves partial success, loves all the kind of things, but playbooks and moves feel super restrictive. And exactly what Hunter said, that's exactly what I don't like about the system. I want to be able to do whatever I want to do and not fit it into I defend blah 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 whatever. Like I just want to, like you said, throw shit if I want to throw shit, and it's just if I have to roll, tell me I have to roll, and that's it. But the bell curve is just, and the partial success, like to me, like rolling like a 7 on a 2d6 partial success system is like the greatest thing that a player could do and a GM gets the opportunity for. So.
Yeah, it's super fun because it's like it borrows the goal of story games with the whole partial success, where it gives you like the story has been changed. There's new stakes because you got partial, without carrying over all the baggage of fronts and playbooks and moves and such. So yeah, I'm super hyped for it.
Yeah,
I think we are. Listen, I think we're all properly stoked, actually.
Just a little bit. I feel like when we do our 2023 year-end review, I feel like this one's probably going to be on it probably as much as Kingdoms was in 2022. I don't know how you do it, but your games, I mean, I haven't seen this one yet, so this is all just excitement coming into it. They're so fucking good. Like, you're just really like, it's clear also, like, talking to you, like, how knowledgeable you are about like game design in the space and stuff like that. And what, I mean, I don't know what to say besides that. Like, good job. Like, it's really cool to hear someone who's like so like purposeful in the way that they design the games, as opposed to just being like, well, someone did this, so I'm going to do the same dragon game or something like that.
It is really interesting.
I love it.
It is really interesting. Like, I feel like every time we have somebody on talk to them about like their design philosophy or how they think about things, we continue to get these like very unique perspectives. And I think that you like, especially talking, talk about Nexus as well, but Fever Dream Nexus, but talk about Kingdoms, like your background with board games and like your thoughts on like this, like even if we saying like the simulation, like kind of OSRE side. I think that's what really made Kingdoms really strong is like you're obviously like unique. I mean, to our realm at least, like board game background. That really worked in your favor. And even like your thoughts on using 2d6 and kind of what you liked about PBTA. I'm interested to see what you continue to put. I'm really excited for Fever Dream Nexus, but I'm also I will continue to be excited for your next project after that.
Yeah, I am like definitely. I love designing games. There's a reason I will never, or not. I'm not gonna say never, but there's a reason I do standalone systems with the setting, because I just feel like designing a game for the setting is always just like the tightest shit, like as opposed to like borrowing and using some other foundation. Like designing things is my favorite part of the book.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. And we talked about this before, you do the art, right? For both Kingdoms and for this. And like, it's really cool. This is like 100%. I mean, first off, I told you before, like I'm a huge fan of the art in both. Like, I think it's really great. I'm a big fan of the style, but it's cool that you have such a hand on the creation of your project. That's like very uniquely your vision, doing all the writing and all the drawing. I think Chris McDowell at one point after Electric Bastion Lands and when Into the Odd was coming out, talked about how Electric Bastion Lands had like some of their voices and Into the Odd was like just Chris's voice, like just like Bastion itself was. And I feel like these things are also very just you. That's cool.
I think it definitely affords me like a lot of interesting creative room when I'm combining the writing, the design, and the art like all in one like hand. I feel like that definitely adds a certain level of cohesion that you kind of miss out on when it's like a group project. I'm a very selfish creator.
That's okay. It's your creation.
Yeah, I feel like if everybody had your like obviously plethora of talents between, you know, design, writing, and the art to be able to do it, I feel like just about everybody would, you know. I mean, I have not problem. I'm not calling it a problem. I would love to be in control of every aspect of a project and not have to rely on anybody else. Or don't look at me like that. It's not a problem. Okay, I handle it just fine. But it would be amazing to be able to handle like every single aspect of the project. Now, when you are doing the projects outside of that, do you have people you collaborate with, or do you have like developmental editors, or is it mostly line editing, or like who, if there is anybody else associated to your projects, like who do you generally, you know, bring in for those things?
Yeah, so I have the core group I've been DMing for forever, like literally since I was 14. With my first DMing group, I still play with them, and shout out to them. I love playtesting with them. I don't get to play with them enough nowadays. Growing old sucks. And then there's like, you probably have seen him pop up. He's on the side of Kingdoms. He's like all over Twitter. You've probably seen William a bunch. He was like big in helping me design like the macro in Kingdoms. So like definitely follow him on Twitter if you haven't already. William Kitziger. He edits my stuff, which now he's kind of moved on to his own projects lately. So like he's not as big in terms of design, but he's still very much there playtesting and editing with me with Fever Dream. There's also Holly Estelle, which she's on like the front of the book. She was originally helping me with like the programming side with like the Dynasty Crafter thing that unfortunately like didn't manage to hit release. But she definitely helped edit the entire book through of Kingdoms. She's definitely still helping me like talk about design. I run things through her. She play tested me as well.
Nice. Shout out your team, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the last thing really I wanted to ask you about, because we've talked about, so I've never actually got to play Kingdoms, and part of that is because Hunter and I have talked about this, and I guess this is kind of a question for you and your group a little bit. We've always said that Kingdoms kind of requires a very specific group of people to play, because I feel like I would make a lot of people mad playing this game. I feel like you kind of have to be, how can I say this in the nicest way that I could possibly imagine saying this? I feel like you kind of have to be like, God,
you can't take things too personally when you fuck each other over like at every other turn, you know?
Like I've said this to Hunter too. Like I was like, I would murder you like so hard, and he'd be like, yeah, I'd stab you in the back, and I would be like, fuck you, but awesome. Like, you know what I mean? Like you really have to have a group that, first of all, I feel like really knows each other really well, but second, like that kind of being like fucked up and backstabby is like seen as like good fucking job. So do you feel like the group of people you created both Kingdoms and Fever Dream Nexus with, and obviously that you've been playing with since you were 14, like has shaped the way that you design? And do you feel like if it was with other people, you would have done things a little bit differently? Yeah.
100%, because like nowadays in the current like 5e like traditional, or not traditional, but current 5e like RPG atmosphere, there is this like thing where it's like, no party fighting, don't split the party, everyone needs to hold hands and sing kumbaya. In Kingdoms, it's definitely made with a group that's like in mind, with a group that is okay with killing each other. Like you are competing kingdoms, even though you work together under one like God King, under one like empire, and fight beasts together. In my playtest and games of Kingdoms, there was like tons of PvP. There's tons of like backstabbing and just straight up duels between kingdoms. There's rules for like wars between kingdoms.
Yeah, there is
in the book. It's definitely not. It's probably one of the reasons why I didn't like catch on like super well, is because it takes a certain group that's okay with like fighting each other. So yeah, you're definitely not wrong. Fever Dream though is, I would not, it still has some interpersonal conflict, especially if like some cultures hate other cultures, some like et cetera, et cetera. And with the shadows, it can create a situation where you're forced to like hurt another player or disadvantage another player. But in general, you are one group. You travel between places together. So I'd say it's a lot less of a PvP. It's very chaotic, but less direct. I need to fuck you over to get things for me.
Yeah.
Very funny.
It's so fucking, like, it's so good. Like, I can't tell you how excited I am for this. And as you said multiple times, like, getting to talk to you makes me even more excited, and for the project that comes after this, because I feel like these are almost, you know, like a similar vein, but almost two sides of the same coin between Kingdoms and Fever Dream Nexus, where it's almost like a mirror, but there's still like that kind of element that goes through both of them, which is that it's like it's pretty fucked up. I mean, your stuff is really, really good in a very, very dark way. I know Fever Dream Nexus is what's happening right now, and without going into it at all, like, do you have like other ideas like in the back burner for like, you know, in the future, or do you just have things like come to you as they come to you and then you work on it after you finish something?
So I'd say it's a mix of both. Both Kingdoms. The Kingdoms was straight up like, if you recall, I launched the Kickstarter for on like the 27th. Like I really like that, really just fucking sprang out of like last second. Like I was like, I should do this. Like it had no intention of being a Kickstarter while running it and designing it, and it just kind of happened. And then during that 2-year break I took, I went through a lot of things in life, moved a lot, went through like crazy shit. And I didn't actually think I was going to come back and make more books, like honestly. But like I just had a push last year after like conquering a lot of stuff, and decided I'm going to come back. I'm going to make it known like I can make books. So Fever Dream Nexus is kind of a step up in terms of art, productive value, effort, you know, like just it's a way bigger project. But in the future, I obviously can't predict what happens next, because like Kingdoms Fever Dream kind of popped up just it's been mulling around for a while, but I only really took it seriously like a few months before the Kickstarter. I definitely have a project on the back burner that I actually thought about launching instead of Kingdoms in 2020. That has been like just in the background for a long time. That is a humongous, like multi-book, huge project. Like I don't want to say magnum opus, but like it's definitely some crazy ambitious thing that I'm just putting off into the future, and just like someday I'll get towards it.
Oh yeah. Well, we hope to see that come to occur.
Yeah.
So.
And obviously, if that comes, we'd love to have you back on the show as well. I mean, honestly, anytime you ever do anything, like, just expect me to message you on Twitter and ask you to come on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I love being here.
Yeah, this is pretty cool.
It's, again, like, thank you for making this. This is, again, like, my favorite game. I can't imagine what's gonna happen with Fever Dream, and I'm excited for the project that comes after that. Now, with Kingdoms, with Fever Dream Nexus, so obviously you're on Kickstarter right now with Fever Dream Nexus. There's 20 days to go. We were climbing through stretch goals, as we said before, so you can find that on Kickstarter. But where can people find your other stuff? Like, what's the best way for people to find your content or buy your games?
So if you want to get Kingdoms, like now, to get all my new releases, I would go to Gumroad. I have a Gumroad. I think it's gumroad.com/thepirate. I have it linked through my Twitter, which that's the best way to find news about my projects, find bonus content, because I throw like random stuff up there sometimes. So definitely check out my Twitter at Sophia Tinney. And there's links to my Gumroad, links to Kickstarter there. But yeah, Gumroad's definitely the best place. Like I said, if you get it through, like, not to put them down because they're very sweet, but if you get through Exalted Funeral, you definitely won't get all the tiny little bonus items. Gumroad is straight from me.
There you go.
Very cool.
So, hey, like we said, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It was really, really great to talk to. And again, like, listen, if you ever feel like running a game, you just reach out and let me know.
Yeah, actually, you want to run a game?
You guys need Kingdoms to be run? Like, hit me up.
Oh, yeah, that'd be really cool. That'd be unbelievably cool.
I'm going to take that as written in stone, and I'm going to set that up with you.
Hell yeah.
But again, expect Sophia to come on again, like, anytime that she ever puts anything out. Honestly, like, you're unquestionably, like, one of my favorite creators now, I assume, with Runner 2. Like, both, like, your games are amazing, sound amazing, and super excited and really glad to have you on. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys for the invite. It's been super fun just rambling about my shit for like an hour.
Yeah. It's been cool having you on. Yeah, thanks for hopping on with us.
Mm-hmm.
So for those listening in chat, we're going to go to a BRB so we can say goodbye to Sophia here. But if you want to stick around, we're actually going to do a Zemo kind of preview, which we were going to talk about Fever Dream Nexus, but now we already have. We just did. So. Yeah. So, but stick around for that. And if you're listening in podcast land, just click on the next episode. But again, thank you so much for being here, and we will be back shortly.